Good morning. I am Ina Harvey, IICA representative in Barbados and IICA's agro-tourism specialist, and your chairperson for this morning's UNWTO IICA webinar on food supply and tourism in the Caribbean. I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of our participants throughout Latin America and the Caribbean, including ministers, development partners, and tourism and agriculture stakeholders. We ask all participants to post their questions and comments on the social media channels. And for those needing translation into Spanish, please select interpretation on your screen. Over the next 90 minutes, you will be hearing from both public and private sector representatives of the tourism and agri-food sectors in the Caribbean region on the theme of mitigating the impacts of COVID-19 and accelerating recovery. I would now like to invite the representatives of our joint hosts, Alejandro Varela, UNWTO Deputy Regional Director for the Americas, and Mr. Lloyd Day, Deputy Director General of IICA, to give their welcome remarks. Alejandro, over to you. Alejandro? Hola, Alejandro. Alejandro Varela will now give welcome remarks on behalf of UNWTO. Por favor, Alejandro.
Ina, this is Diana from UNWTO Academy. It looks like we have lost for a moment a connection with Alejandro. I believe that he will be rejoining us within the next couple of minutes. Okay. Please continue with Mr. Lloyd, and I'm sure Mr. Alejandro Varela will be here with us soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Alejandro will be with us in a few minutes. Let me invite Mr. Lloyd Day, Deputy Director General of IICA. Lloyd, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ina. Good morning, Ministers of Agriculture and Tourism, Dr. Varela. Hope you can rejoin us, fellow participants, colleagues from IICA and the UNWTO, and everyone following live on social media. It's an honor to be with you this morning. I bring greetings from Dr. Unwto, the Director General of IICA, who's unable to be with us this morning. The topic of this webinar, concentrating on the food supply and tourism sectors in the Caribbean in the context of the COVID-19 crisis, is a priority, not just for our partners in the Caribbean, but for the entire hemisphere and for many donors around the world. The Caribbean has been hit by the triple blow of the pandemic to human health, its effects on all sectors of the economy, in particular, the vital tourism sector, and the annual season of deadly and unpredictable hurricanes. I will not dwell on the statistics we all know, but rather express IICA's thanks to the UNWTO and all participants in this dialogue to help concentrate on how we can work together to address the challenges confronting us during this unique time. The Caribbean region is perhaps the most tourism-dependent region in the world, as well as the most vulnerable on the planet with respect to shocks related to climate events. So both of our sectors, tourism and agriculture, have a lot of work to do to make our sectors more resilient, more vibrant, and to recover with an eye toward the future. And it makes sense to do it together. We must seize this opportunity to help build a stronger and more resilient agricultural sector, to help feed the citizens of the region, and also in the future, the millions of tourists that will return to visit one of the most beautiful places on planet Earth. But for now, we need to develop the agricultural sector in a way that is sustainable and provides long-term economic development and improved food security for the region. And I am sure there are a lot of lessons that can be learned by partnering and collaborating with the tourism sector for today, tomorrow, and long into the future. Therefore, with the support of strategic partners from the public and private sectors, civil society, and academia at the national, regional, and international level, such as those partners who are participating in today's webinar, IICA, through its technical cooperation agenda, reaffirms its commitment to joint efforts to improve the resilience of the Caribbean region to the crises that affect the region. In closing, I take this opportunity to thank all of you who have joined us to make today's event a success and wish you all the very best for a very productive webinar. IICA believes that the outcomes of today's deliberation can serve as a blueprint for advancing the SDGs and for building a more equitable, sustainable, and resilient Caribbean region in the future. Thank you very much. Back to you, Ina.
Thank you so much, Lloyd. And I will now ask Alejandro Varela, UNWTO Deputy Regional Director for the Americas, to bring welcome remarks from the WTO. Alejandro, ¿estás aquí?
Ina, hello. Tiana
No
from
todavía.
UNWTO.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm so
right.
sorry. We are having
That's
small
okay.
issues. Please continue on with the pre-established agenda, and I'm sure
Okay.
Alejandro will be here with us soon. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Not a problem. The first panel looks at the impact of COVID-19 on tourism in the Caribbean and the plans in place for recovery and mitigation of risk. It's moderated by Sandra Carvao, UNWTO Chief of Market Intelligence and Competitiveness. Over to you, Sandra.
Very good morning to all participants and everyone that follows us today. Thank you so much, Ina. My name is Sandra Carvao, as it was mentioned, and I greet you from the World Tourism Organization headquarters in Madrid. It's a great pleasure to be with you today and discuss this important link between agriculture and tourism that we know has been there for many times, but often not highly regarded, and a necessary step forward to strengthen our collaboration. It is my great pleasure to share this discussion with, I think, the two people that probably know more about what is happening in tourism in the Caribbean, but also how can we work better towards recovery. I have the pleasure of having me joining today in this panel discussion, Mr. Neil Walters. He's the Acting Secretary General of the Caribbean Tourism Organization, longtime partner with UNWTO, and also Mr. Frank Comito, the CEO and Director General of the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association. I'm sure that for all of you that follow us, they don't need introductions. So just before we go into the discussion of what we are seeing in the Caribbean, I would like to take this opportunity to share with you a broader view of where the impact of COVID-19 is being felt worldwide, to put the perspective of the global international tourism into this Caribbean discussion. UNWTO latest data that was just published last week shows that within the first 6 months of 2020, we lost an estimated 65% of all international travels. Just to recall that the previous year we had 1.5 billion international tourists worldwide. As you can see from the chart in the screen, the distribution of the impact is rather similar across the regions, with obviously a much higher impact in Asia and the Pacific, considering that the region started to suffer from the COVID-19 restrictions much earlier in the year. But if you look around between Europe, Africa, and Middle East, we're around 60% in most of the regions. Going a little bit into what we can expect towards the end of this year, UNWTO has released last May 3 possible scenarios, very much looking into how we can expect international tourism to be affected by the ongoing travel restrictions, and looking into the possible impact of gradual opening of borders. Our first scenario pointed out that despite the gradual opening that we are seeing since July, we would end the year at minus 58%. The second scenario pointed to a decrease of 70%, and the third scenario to a decline of 80%. Looking into what is happening actually at this moment, and with our estimates covering until the month of August, we see that unfortunately we are closer to our second scenario of a decline of minus 70% as we close 2020. The million-dollar question that everyone has, and we're all trying to answer at this point with all the very volatile situation that we face, is when can we expect recovery levels to go back to where we were prior to the crisis? And if we look into those scenarios that we just saw and we prolong them towards the next years to come, we at UNWTO see that we'll probably have what is called a V asymmetric shape recovery, which means that globally at the international level, it would take us 2.5 years to 4 years to actually get back to the previous levels of 2019. Just to give you an idea, the Americas took, after September 11, 3.5 years to go back to previous levels. Obviously, the biggest challenge that the world faces are travel restrictions. As of September, UNWTO monitoring shows that there is an improvement. There are countries around the world, around 53% of the countries that have improve their travel restrictions, including 18 seeds in the Americas, but still many countries have their borders totally closed. Just looking into the Caribbean, and I'm not going to go into detail because this is going to be something that we will hear from our panelists. We see that the impact in arrivals up to June is very similar to the other regions of the Americas. And also, I invite you all to look into what we've developed at UNWTO, which our UNWTO Tourism Recovery Tracker, that allows you to have an idea of the different indicators of tourism in the different regions, including the Caribbean. And you can see how, for example, hotel searches are performing, hotel bookings, but also actual air reservations. Again, we are monitoring all these indicators by month, which hopefully, as we move along, will allow us to see green shoots coming in the months to come. But unfortunately, for the moment, it is a situation that is common to most of the world regions. Declines in the month of August are very much around still 90% when you look at air bookings actually made. So this takes us obviously to the challenge that we face globally. UNWTO estimates that around 100 million jobs might be at risk, considering the impact of COVID on tourism. But we have also highlighted, and we were echoed by the UN Secretary General in his latest brief on tourism and the COVID, that actually among the most vulnerable are the seeds. And I think the Caribbean is a point in case. And you can see here the level of countries that depend in terms of their GDP of tourism as an export. And obviously there are many countries among the seeds that have a share of GDP coming from tourism in terms of exports between 20 and 60%. So the challenge is there, and it's very good that we can all be together discussing this today, looking into solutions that allows us to get forward in this challenging situation. And I'm sure that from the discussion and the inputs for both Mr. Neil and Mr. Frank Unwto, we will be able to end this panel with actionable steps forward that we can all take. With that said, I'd like very much now to invite Mr. Neil Walters to do his presentation and to take us through his remarks.
Thank you very much for this opportunity Sandra, to speak here this morning. Certainly, we at the Caribbean Tourism Organization, trying to share my screen here. It's not allowing me to. Okay. Right. Right, so the Caribbean Tourism Organization began monitoring the effects of this pandemic around March this year, when we started to see cases reaching our shores. I'm sorry, something is wrong here. It's not allowing me to change pages. I'm not sure why.
I think you need to put the PowerPoint.
Okay, I was there, but it wasn't, Zoom wasn't allowing me, right? So as I said, first case is seen end of February, early March, and the Caribbean countries took swift action to mitigate against the spread of the virus. And you will see there some of the actions that were taken. Pretty much, I think that's in chronological order: quarantine of travelers from hotspots, through to closure of borders to international travelers. I believe that was by sometime finally in April this year, for all destinations. Destinations began reopening in June, and there has been a phased reopening of destinations to date. What it has meant was initially repatriation flights of nationals who were stranded when the borders were closed, were in most cases the first phase, and that has moved up to this time now to actually acceptance and arrival of international visitors to several of our destinations. By the end of June, as we was just alluded to, the Caribbean's international arrivals had declined by 57.3%, clearly in line with what was just presented. And we were looking at the US portion of those arrivals declining by 60.1%, Canadian 43.8%, European 54.8%. And on the other side there is that cruise arrivals also declined by the end of June by 49%. The first 2 months of summer, which are traditionally May and June, saw a 99.1% reduction. Even though, as I said, the reopening occurred in June, it was mainly repatriation flights borne out there by that percentage decline. So as of today, there are 22 destinations open in various phases of opening. As I mentioned, in a nutshell, just know what the phase I meant. And there are signs of some increases in levels of arrivals as we approach the start of the winter season in December. But even with that, our initial projections are that we would see something in the tune of 50 to 70% decline in arrivals by the end of December this year, in line again with what UNWTO is projecting. And obviously this is because of several destinations being at different stages in that range. But we expect that it should top out around 70%. So in terms of recovery and mitigation of risk, the primary effort so far has been via the integration of the public health and tourism functions. CTO has been part of this effort from the start and is a member of the Caribbean COVID-19 Tourism Task Force, which is several entities in the Caribbean. I'm gonna steal a little bit of Frank's thunder here because he's gonna go into detail on this, because obviously issues related to public health and so would be significantly impacting the accommodation sector and the general tourism sites and attractions, which Frank actually, his agency represents. So CTO has been part of this task force made up of the CTO, the OECS Organization of Eastern Caribbean States Commission, Caribbean Public Health Agency, the Global Tourism Research and Crisis Management Center. And we have been functioning since early March, yes, to ensure that we keep on top of the main issues within the Caribbean. It is obviously, as you can see, based on the makeup, a collaborative effort between the public and the private sector. So the protocols for travel to destinations plus guidelines and checklists have been created. And the key point there is that it seeks to assure travelers that the Caribbean is a safe and healthy choice for their vacation once they're ready to travel. Caribbean region does remain as one of the most desirable regions in the world. And this harks back to when the earliest days of tourism in the Caribbean. We have several factors which we recognize are very critical to the propagation of tourism in our sphere. And critical here is the fact that there's a diversity in the Caribbean tourism product. and the elements of the existing product, which we already have, already set us apart from the rest of the world: natural habitat, heritage, culture, and cuisine. The key thing here is the ability to market these desirable elements. And that is a very key part of managing the recovery pace of Caribbean tourism. As we all know on this call, COVID has leveled tourism internationally, so that any region or any tourism destination seeking to come back after this this crisis has to be able to show to the intrepid traveler that they have something the traveler wants to experience, and that is where we're saying the Caribbean stands out. So in addition to that necessary integration I mentioned that Frank will go into details on, the new normal requires that we think outside the box, and we have to become creative with promoting existing property sites and attractions. One of the things that the CTO has been involved in for a number of years now is the idea of expanding and enhancing on the existing examples of community-based tourism in the Caribbean. Because we see this as a way of helping vulnerable persons to benefit from tourism. And CTO is about to launch with another donor agency a program to put out some projects in Caribbean countries, especially in rural areas in Caribbean countries. The other side is domestic tourism, or staycations as we call them in the Caribbean. And they can be a stopgap in crises like this one, especially where international travel is stopped for obvious reasons. And we recently had a webinar which was case studying the Isle of Man off the British mainland, I believe it is. And they pointed out how they continued their domestic tourism program throughout this whole lockdown process, even though the UK is their main catchment point for visitors. And they have shown that they have seen some success in terms of mitigating the closure of businesses and the losses of income and so on, promoting your home as a place you can go. And this is especially important since we are predicting as well, we're saying that by the end of June, we were looking at about 50 to 60% reduction in revenues from tourism. So I'll bring it to an end here by saying, you know, the experts say we'll face future pandemics and other challenges. And clearly the lessons learned from this pandemic can be incorporated into, have been incorporated into our way of life. They've been onerous, but they've been necessary. And I think we can it will be necessary to keep some of them in place, especially as it relates to health. And we can learn a lesson definitely from African countries after the effects of Ebola a few years ago. The damage to the tourism sector forces us to find ways to make it sustainable, even while we look at other ways of diversifying our economies. And the reality is, it shows us clearly, I believe, that we need to forge ahead on the links with other economic sectors such as agriculture, and I dare say the emerging cultural sector, as ways of diversifying how our economies earn on an annual basis. And as I said, linking of key sectors is necessary for the mitigation of risk in our vulnerable economies. So you can see CTO's Caribbean and COVID-19 information at that link there. And I thank you for listening, and I'll pass back to Sandra.
Thank you very much, Neil. Thank you for that detailed and for that inspiration at the end. I think the message of the linkages with other sectors is precisely the objective of today. And while you were speaking, I was just imagining, you know, Americans at home receiving nice Caribbean products and saying, you know, here's your ticket dream to come back to the Caribbean. Yeah. So maybe we can start a campaign on that. That said, it's my pleasure to pass the virtual floor to Frank Comito. Frank, please go ahead with your remarks and presentation.
Thank you, Sandra. And I'm going to try to pull up my presentation right now. Let's see. It's saying who can share, only hosts, all panelists. I'm not seeing the ability to pull it up.
I'm going to ask the support of our colleagues back in the mountains of Andorra who are supporting us technically. If you can check, please, Frank's profile.
There it is. Okay, I'm there. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
perfect.
Thank you. I'm going to pull it up.
Please go ahead.
Yes. Thank you, Sandra and Neil, for that great backdrop, and as well, thank you to UNWTO and IICA for Ina and team there for putting this forum together. Neil's provided a good backdrop, and Sandra's data was very helpful, but let me dive a little bit into some of the hotel performance data as well, so you get a read on that. Just by perspective, on March 7th, STR, which works with globally, works with the industry on monitoring occupancy levels, hotel occupancy levels, they reported that on March 7th, the Caribbean was experiencing a 76% occupancy rate, which is makes for a robust season. We were entering into a robust winter season. We were in the mix of it. 3 weeks later, just 3 weeks later, that occupancy plummeted from 76% to 8.4%. So it was very dramatic and very quick. You know, and for the industry, 50% on average is the occupancy operating break-even point. And that doesn't mean servicing debt or any net profit or anything like that. So you can see the incredible vulnerability that it has placed on the industry. With a number of the destinations in the region opening by August, we had seen that occupancy jump from its single digits to 20%, just under 20%, 19.6%, I believe it was. And at best, by the end of the year, we're looking at occupancies in the region as more destinations open up, more hotels in those destinations open up, running about 20 to 40%. Still below what's needed to really sustain operations for long term. So we've got some real exposure here, which means we've got to look to the winter to be able to get us up into that a little bit more of a comfort zone. Next winter, we're projecting at this point, things can change if there's a major increase in the pandemic incidents. No, we're hoping for 40 to 70% occupancy for the region. So let's talk a little bit about some of CHTA's areas of focus, some of it which Neil covered on as well. Since early on, since late January, we jumped on this right away with information sharing, working with the Caribbean Public Health Agency and CTO and others in providing information to our members, to the industry, to governments, to the media, and so on, just to begin to make ourselves aware of what the situation is, and that's continued throughout. We've conducted numerous types of surveys and research within the industry on practices, impact, mitigation efforts, and recommendations on moving forward. And we've also become a clearinghouse for COVID-related tourism industry data. We have a resource, COVID-19 Resource Center on our website, which has a wealth of information. We've strongly subscribed to coordination and collaboration to helping to develop health safety protocols for the industry, and I'll touch on that in a little bit in a minute. Some areas of advocacy where we've been involved, we had provided input to CARICOM and heads of government on recommended health safety efforts and protocols. We've collated and shared mitigation and best practice efforts, advanced cancellation policies for the industry, which are pretty broad and wide right now related to COVID, which we believe is helping us. We've been addressing some inequitable practices by several global tour operators who have withheld payments on services rendered by the industry to the tunes of tens of millions of dollars, and it's having an impact. And we've had some progress there, but not as much as we'd like. And we've advanced other regional protocols for testing and other health safety efforts. We've been an advocate for communications and public relations, reaching out to various areas to get the real word out on what's going on within the industry and what we're doing to provide some health safety types of support insurance. And a lot of that's come through training, and we've had several types of training that we've done. We've run over 10,000 people through training since June, and our resilience series webinars as well, providing useful information on anything from refinancing to how to deal with insurance to airlift and understanding what's going on, and so on. And we're also concerned and have been working to address some capacity shortfalls for the nonprofit organizations. And it's not subject just to us. We have tourism boards and CTO, and all of us are whose revenue is dependent on tourism are suffering from what's going on. But I want to touch briefly on a very unique partnership that Neil mentioned earlier as well, to do a deal with tourism on our COVID-19 Caribbean Tourism Task Force. We convened ourselves early in March, and our goal to collaborate on health safety prevention and mitigation efforts. We had some experience because CTO and CHTA have had a partnership with the Caribbean Public Health Agency for over 5 years. A lot of our work on Zika has prepared us for this. Our work on hurricanes, aside from this, has also made the region able to, we believe, better respond to and prepare and respond to what's going on right now. But we convened and our mandate basically with the task force is in the area of information sharing, developing protocols, training, monitoring, and recognition. So let me talk a little bit about show you just a couple of the key outputs that we've had as well. We have developed what I would say were probably some of the most comprehensive health and safety guidelines checklists for the industry by sector. And they, as Neil mentioned, they've been broadly distributed throughout the public and private sectors into all other sectors. And they're the backup for training that we've been doing since June, and we're in the midst of doing constantly right now as well. With that, also, we've been able to weave in some recognitions for health safety standards, meeting health safety standards by businesses that participate in the training that we're doing, that CARF is doing, and so on. And also the World Travel and Tourism Council has endorsed our protocols and training and so on, and we're able to issue their safe travels certificate as well for folks who meet the criteria that we've established. We've established and put in place a travel insurance program, partnering with one of the largest providers globally for travel insurance, TripMate, and have woven that into our offerings as well to provide added consumer confidence in traveling to the Caribbean. There's a slide there on the upper right in terms of our roundtables. We've been doing a lot of public relations and outreach for destinations and for the sector. With the various global trade as well as consumer media. And our roundtables have been partnered with some of the household names whose logos that you see down there, providing detailed information on a range of kinds of things we do through our resilience series roundtable sessions every week. We also had a dedicated session on nothing but F&B, and had literally tens of thousands of participants in that six-part series. And we'll be picking that up again shortly as well. And then I think that's most of what I wanted to cover on, but in closing, some areas of focus as we look forward to continued health safety training and awareness, and working on some level playing field areas, trying to get airlift stimulated back into the region, as well as addressing some other advocacy issues, particularly with global tour operators, providing and advocating for business support mechanisms to help facilitate and minimize those who will be casualties as to what's going on, and addressing some labor-related matters that are concerned regionally with what we might say are steeped in old world kind of things, severance kinds of things, and so on, which would literally, if held to the letter of the law by some destinations, would put businesses, would put hotels and businesses out of business and have a detrimental effect from what the intended result is. So seeking some sort of quid pro quo kind of mitigation, as is going on in Barbados, and I believe Jamaica's done a little bit of that as well, to help keep the properties open, get people back to work, and get them increased hours and so on as we grow the business. And then this final point as well is just strongly urging that we collaborate wherever possible, that we're going to get through this because we're all working together, public, private sector stakeholders, multilaterals, and so on. The IDB has been a great partner for CTO and CHTA, and we're looking forward to their continued support in helping to deal with some of our capacity shortfalls and needs as we move forward. And other organizations have been reaching out to us, and we've been reaching out to them for looking for ways in which we can help stimulate and reinvigorate and revitalize tourism. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that overview, Frank, and particularly for leaving us with the message of the importance of collaboration. I think this is one of the lessons that we've all learned from this crisis, but also the stressing of the importance of supporting the sector going through the crisis, though as we struggle for recovery, that we make sure that those businesses are supported. You mentioned Jamaica. I'm sure that the minister will take us through what they're doing. So I think we still have a little bit of time here in the discussion panel, around some 2 or 3 minutes. I invite the participants who want to share any questions, both for Neil and for Frank, to share it in the question and answer chat room. If we can't answer them now, I'm sure that we'll come back to them at some point. But I would take my own question, if we don't have any on the chat, and ask you both, how do you see the needs of the sector in terms of if you would have to, and Frank was talking about training, this moment where many properties are closed, and you mentioned also the IDB support, apart from the financial component, what can be done to actually help the sector prepare for that reopening? Because we do have a lot of people now that unfortunately are not operating because the properties are closed. If you would have to do a letter to Santa Claus and say, you know, we would need support to train our people, and looking into the options of strengthening the gastronomy link into this 2 specific areas.
Neil, you want to go first, or should I?
No, you go ahead.
Okay. I mean, some of it is tied to the point that we made about collaboration and leveraging our resources. So we have limited resources right now, all of us, governments, private sector, nonprofit organizations like ours. So it gets back to that point of collaboration. If we work together, particularly around issues of training, but also around issues that Neil touched on as well, around marketing, and not only the marketing and public relations, because there needs to be an understanding of what the facts are in the region. We've done relatively very well in containing COVID. We have some challenges, but we've done very, very relatively well, and we want to continue in that vein. But that does require getting the message out as well as to what the health safety is, what we've done to provide assurances to travelers, and also that we're a hop away from major markets and an opportunity to get somewhere. So getting revenue back into businesses and governments is absolutely essential. So collaboration again around that whole area of marketing and public relations, I think would really help. And I think those are challenges both within our industry as well as for destinations, and beyond the scope of just CARICOM or whatever, into the entire broader Caribbean basin, I think is really important, because sometimes we move forward with things without considering, by example, the Dominican Republic. And it's both sides. I think the DR needs to step to the plate to be a collaborator, and likewise the region needs to embrace the DR. They represent 25% of Caribbean tourism, and really not at the table the
I think
way they need to be, and that's both sides need to make that happen. So that whole collaboration is important. Thank
you, Frank. Neil?
I endorse what Frank is saying, but I think one of the things that our concern is about the CTO as well at this time is the fact that the closure of businesses has meant that several people who have been trained on the job in tourism may likely not return to the sector. The Caribbean is especially known for warmth, etc., and being welcoming and hospitable to visitors. And we do have to find a way to retain those people to pass on best practices to the next generation of tourism workers. So the CTO is actually about to start a tourism human resources audit for the region, which I think is very critical to ensure that going forward, we do have the requirements and the human resources capacity to meet what we expect will be a sector that will grow back to the levels it was before. So that is a kind of a fine edge we're walking on now, but we do hope that we can mitigate against losses in as short a time as possible. It will require additional training, of course, but we need to know exactly where the training needs to be focused.
Thank you, Neil. I think that's a very important point because it's one of the challenges of the industry, losing a very skillful workforce during this period. I know we're really at 40, which is our deadline in time, but I would just like to ask, I think just to leave the audience with a last message, if you would have to choose one priority for recovery at this point, what would that be? Just one. So we know where we point our efforts.
Organizations could use a couple $1 million, I think. But no, I think well, we talk collaboration, but also priority is really we have to provide not only health safety assurance to travelers, we have to provide health safety training, assurance, education to our own people. And we've been doing that with our employees, but it really needs to go beyond that. We've had some spread in recent months, and almost all of the spread is community transmission. It's not transmission from tourists coming in, which means that we're doing something right in terms of our training and everything. But we've got to get the population behind it. They've got to understand that some short-term pain in terms of masks, social distancing, all that kind of stuff is long-term gain, that everybody benefits from that. And I'm not sure we're getting enough of that word out there.
Thank you, Frank. Neil?
Even as we talk about, there's been a lot of talk recently during this pandemic about diversification, but definitely ways to keep the tourism sector sustainable during crises like this. They will come in different forms. And I mean, Frank mentioned, you mentioned, sorry, 9/11. Who knows what the next one will be? But it is a very important sector, and we have to find ways to ensure it can function through a crisis. And I think that's where, that's where I would go with this one. Yeah.
Perfect. I think that's a perfect point, especially as we talk about the relationship between agriculture and tourism. And I think there's a good point there of addressing the domestic market and have local people enjoying their gastronomy together with their tourism assets. With that said, I thank you very much, Neil. Thank you very much, Frank, for your contributions today. And it's my pleasure to pass the floor back to Ina.
Thank you very much, Sandra, as well as Neil and Frank, for a very informative session. I'd like to, before we go into the next session, introduce Alejandro Varela, UNWTO Deputy Regional Director for the Americas, and ask him to bring welcome remarks from UNWTO. Alejandro?
Thank you, Ina. Sorry for the inconvenience. I have a little domestic issue with the internet here at home, but instead of the welcoming remarks, these are going to be middle remarks. We are very happy to have our first joint webinar together with IICA. On behalf of the Secretary General, Mr. Sulapoli-Rikashvili, it's a great honor to be here with you and share our views about this unprecedented pandemic and its consequences in our sector. Such a major event provoked, a massive loss of jobs, a sharp decline in foreign exchange and in tax revenues, which has curbed public spending capacity and the ability to deploy the measures necessary to support livelihoods through the crisis. Thus, IICA and UNWTO have agreed to collaborate to lend their support to the Caribbean region in shaping a holistic approach towards the recovery of agriculture and tourism sectors in a more integrated manner. No doubt, tourism is a socio-economic pillar of the Caribbean because it accounts for over 30% of the total exports in the majority of the countries and reaching as much as 80% in some of them. And in this regard, programs that address training, digital transformation and skills that has already been mentioned, infrastructure maintenance, implementation of health protocols, social protection should be at the core of the support devised by the international community to the Caribbean tourism sector. We understand perfectly well the difficult situation the Caribbean is facing right now, and we are firmly committed to bring to you our expertise in developing new strategies to restart tourism with responsibility and coordination. We invite the entire region to deploy measures to sustain businesses and jobs, and we can help you to prepare comprehensive tourism recovery plans, to rebuild destinations, to encourage innovation and investment, and above all, to rethink the tourism sector. I think this is all. Ina, sorry for the interruption of the panel.
No problem.
Thank you very much, and the best to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alejandro Varela. Food is an essential destination attribute and critical to destination imaging for the Caribbean, especially where our food is so fantastic. And this second panel focuses on the impact of COVID on the suppliers of food to the tourism and hospitality sector. The panel is moderated by Greg Rollins, IICA's representative in the Eastern Caribbean states. Over to you, Greg.
Thank you very much, Ina, and a pleasant good morning, good afternoon to all who are joining us for this webinar. It's indeed a pleasure for me to have the opportunity to moderate this second panel, which focuses on the COVID impact on the suppliers of food to the tourism and hospitality sectors. I gather that it follows logically, given the impact of COVID on the tourism sector, that any businesses, any operations that depend on the tourism sector as a market for their goods and services would have also felt the effects of COVID. And the agri-food sector is no exception to this. As you're well aware, we have been working over the years to foster stronger linkages between the agri-food and the tourism sectors, given the obvious benefits in forging such linkages. And we have achieved some levels of success where we do have businesses that depend heavily on the tourism sector as a market for their products. One of the major challenges during this period has been to find mechanisms that allow those businesses to cope, to be able to adjust to the loss of their markets. And many governments have been looking at how they can adjust their programs, their policies to create space for these operators to continue to be able to engage in the marketing of their products. This morning, we have two very experienced presenters who are going to share their perspectives with us. I'm going to introduce both of them together in the interest of time and then invite them to make their presentations. First, we have Dr. Donald Keith Emil. Keith is a veterinarian by training. He is currently the head of corporate affairs, Caribbean Broilers in Jamaica. He has served as a senior veterinary officer in the Ministry of Agriculture in Jamaica, as chief technical officer with the Jamaica Livestock Association, and the head of the poultry division of SEPRAD Jamaica Limited. He's a founding member of the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica, the Professional Association of Jamaica, and the Caribbean Agribusiness Association, where he's still very actively involved. And Keith, coming from the poultry industry, we recognize that the poultry industry is one of the major industries that we have in the region. That is a success story. It is well developed, and obviously it has been able to forge linkages across not just with the domestic market, but also with the tourism market. He will be followed by Mr. Pedro Corbin, who currently serves as the regional manager for Caribbean catering operations with the Goddard Group of companies in Antigua and Barbuda. Pedro brings over 40 years of experience in the food service and food catering sector. He has served as the operations manager of the Barbados Flight Kitchen, as general manager of the Goddard Catering Group in Antigua, and he now, as I said, serves as the regional manager. And he brings vast experience, both of them bringing vast experience from different perspectives. Keith from the agribusiness, livestock subsector experience in terms of agribusiness, and Pedro from the food service perspective. So without any further ado, it gives me great pleasure to first invite Keith to make his presentation, and he will be followed directly by Pedro. Keith, the floor is yours.
Good morning, all. I'm on.
Yes, you're on, Keith.
You're on, good. Morning. Out of disappointment can come good. One of the problems we've had in the Caribbean is that the competitive nature of the hotel industry has led the hoteliers to try to find cheap food to feed their guests. And cheap food invariably meant imported food. So the more food imported, the less was produced locally. And it stood in the way of us expanding local production to take up the slack, so to speak. So maybe out of this disappointment, we have closed down the imports of food because it's no longer necessary. It's an opportunity for us at home to look at how we can compensate by growing more Caribbean foods into a Caribbean tourist industry and perhaps put more people to work. We found that when small farmers went to hotels to try to sell their food, they were at the mercy of the purchasing officer, and with hotels now closed, they face bankruptcy. I mean, you need to appreciate that the hotel employs lots of people. In Jamaica, perhaps 120,000 people were sent home. Interestingly, they don't live in the hotel areas. They live in rural areas with their own little farming communities and backyards. And immediately we responded, this is from the Caribbean Broilers Group, by providing them with say, their own broiler chicks to grow and feed themselves. And it has worked rather well. It's not only worked well for feeding themselves, but it provided an alternative way of earning money, where the small farmers in Jamaica now produce up to 1 million kilograms of chicken meat every 7 days, and with the surplus being sold around. But on the other hand, the distributors who lost their import business were able to take up all that extra production that we were doing for the tourist industry. And so we have not come out of this badly at all. But we find that we cannot go on this way. What we have to do is to bring the farmers in the region into value chains where they have alternative ways of growing and disposing of their products. And my company has done this. We've have to create agro parks that provide the common inputs for farmers. But we've above that created a central market, a mother farm system, where the farmers now grow for us. We provide the inputs, the seedlings, the animals, the extension services, and so on. They grow, and we take over the distribution and marketing. It comes into central packing stations where they are distributed in various ways. The COVID has caused the Caribbean to adopt the marketing systems that were being used elsewhere. For instance, we now have direct deliveries to households. So the supermarkets, we have curbside pickups, or the supermarkets themselves deliver to the households, so that production has gone on and has not been at the mercy of the tourist industry. In fact, we have so arranged marketing that the tourist industry only accounts for 25% of what we now distribute. And in that way, we've been able to sustain the agricultural system. But we need to go further than this. within the islands, within the Caribbean, we need to stop these technical barriers to trade, because we need to do horizontal links in a way that will allow us to sustain the hotel and various service systems across the region with the products that we have. And it's a two-way thing. For instance, if I need nutmeg in Jamaica, I'll get that from Grenada. If I need red peppers, I get that from Trinidad. If I need shrimp and fish and rice and coconut water, I can get that from Ghana and Suriname. From Jamaica, you can get our coffee and our rums and our Scotch bonnet peppers and so on. So it's an opportunity to create an international trading system which ultimately will sustain the tourist industry with an experience in Caribbean foods and not all this imported stuff that they brought on the second aircraft when they came to Jamaica. I think we need to pressure the tourist industry to commit to using at least 40% of locally produced foods instead of this imported stuff. I think we need to pressure them to create restaurant systems within the hotels that serve Caribbean foods in addition to all these extraneous restaurants, Italian and so on, that you see when you get there. But even at breakfast in these hotels, you're offered tea and you're offered European teas. We have 20, 30 different types of teas created from our various plants here. And these also need to be served at breakfast and at tea time so that the public is aware of what we have and it enhances their cabin experience. Finally, I'd like to suggest that we have outlets for the herbs and spices and other products we produce, seal and cotton, for instance, where we could have this in our boutiques so that they'd have some of their Caribbean experience to take home with them. This gives the tourism concept a different dimension. If we can trade in these products internationally, one doesn't have to wait for a tourist to arrive in the Caribbean before they're exposed to a Caribbean experience. So foods and beverages through something like Amazon and the various trading agencies can in fact go to them not only in the diaspora, but to the entire rest of the world, a little bit of the Caribbean in a suitcase or an envelope. So this will enable us to enhance the jobs within the region, enable us to set the stage where the idea of coming to the Caribbean to see where these exciting things are produced is something as part of the marketing system, is a possibility. So the downtime may prove to be an advantage. It will give us an opportunity to raise the quality standards, health standards across the region, to upgrade our processing facilities so as to facilitate international trade amongst us, and while safeguarding the health of our foods and drinks. These are some of the ideas that I have, and perhaps they will obviously have to be financed. We'll have to improve the transportation system between the countries, which isn't in good shape. And we will have to have a commitment to work together, to interact, to save and exchange ideas, to save and exchange what we produce, so that the tourists will in fact have a total Caribbean experience away from the imported foods which now sustain the tourist industry.
Thank you very much, Keith. We're going to move on immediately to Pedro. Pedro, you can share your perspectives.
Okay, good morning to you, Keith, and to Greg, and to all the other panelists. Coming from the God Arcadian Group, we are primarily working on airline catering. And I must say the impact of the COVID pandemic actually hit our business directly really hard, because a lot of our business really and truly depended on airlines traveling. And in actual fact, what we saw in the very, as soon as things closed down, what we did see is that some of our businesses were affected by as much as 100%. So therefore we saw losses. We saw some other areas where we had industrial catering, where the losses were probably about 70 to 80%. So that has had a tremendous impact upon us. And when we looked at the arrivals within the Caribbean, this is something that we watch really closely. There's been a decline, which was mentioned earlier, by about 60.4% between January to July, with a high of 81% in Bermuda, where we also operate, and a low of 18% in St. Vincent. So that has obviously impacted upon us directly. When we look at the trends for what is happening within our main tourist source market, which is the US, and I look at the Labor Day statistics, which we tend to watch to gauge how people will travel for the winter. We saw there was a 2.8 billion drop in people traveling within the US. And that is a very important gauge for us, because what that suggests is that people are still not comfortable traveling, and it means they're obviously watching what is the pandemic is having. In fact, it is actually worse when we look at air travel between June 2019 and June 2020. There's been a drop of about 266%, which is just over 457,000 people traveling within that period of time to compare. So obviously these are areas that will impact upon us directly. The anticipation is that we will not see air traffic recovering from this pandemic until about 2023-24. I think originally when it first started, people were looking at probably 21 to 22, but the recent information that is now coming out of IATA is giving us that information. So obviously that is going to have a tremendous impact upon us. And what is interesting is that of that recovery, the domestic recovery, that is obviously the travel within Europe and the US in particular, will be recovering faster. So that is even more trouble for us here in the Caribbean, where they expect international travel will be lagging behind that. In terms of how this impacted our company directly, this is public knowledge where the Goddard group of companies recorded significant losses for the third quarter. And in fact, this is driven a lot by the catering department, which is the one I head in the Caribbean. That is done by about $8.7 million. And we are also expecting similar results for the fourth quarter as we go into this quarter, as it's now finishing at the end of September. So that is going to be significantly impacting our business. The airport closures from March through till now. And we also, at this point in time, we still have about 6 of our airports closed that we normally would be servicing. So this is definitely going to be a very big impact upon us. Now, when we look at this downturn in business for our business, and to support what Keith was just saying, we saw a decline between April to August of about $68 million in revenue, about 77%. Now, how does that translate into what is happening within the Caribbean economies and Latin America where we operate? That is about $20 million worth of supplies that is impacting upon the businesses that rely on us to provide them for their living, whether it be the poultry industry, the agriculture industry, whatever. That is basically the amount of money that we would have spent with all of our various suppliers. And that is something that is extremely significant for one company. So I can imagine the impact that we'll be having on a much wider scale for the whole region in which we operate in. And so for the Caribbean alone, just to look at that number, that's probably around $10 to $11 million alone in the Caribbean, in such a small society. That is significant. So we really and truly have to find ways that we're able to bring this business back to us. In addition to that, we're going to be straddled with a lot of the additional costs, higher costs of products and the new protocols. These are areas that we have to maintain international standards, and especially when it comes to our quality and health. And these new protocols are very costly for us, but it's some things that we have to do. We have to train all of our employees to ensure that they maintain these standards, because we are subjected to international audits by our various airline customers. I mentioned the closures that we had before. The impact upon our organization in terms of employment. We've had to lay off about 40% of our employees. So, and that translates to about just over 2,000 persons that the company has had to lay off during this pandemic in order for us to try and survive. Outlook for the catering division. What we are looking at now is that the industry, we were relying on about 70% of our business coming directly from the airline industry. Obviously, that is something that this pandemic has taught us that it's not sustainable going forward, because we will have other pandemics, whether it be something of the nature of another outbreak from a health standpoint, or something like September 11. So we really and truly have to look at how we are going to be able to survive. The last quarter that we're going to be in, which is going to end in September, is going to reflect similar results from what we did in the third quarter. So we really and truly have to look at it. What our company is doing is that we have started to look at a lot of diversification within our industry, in order to survive and provide, and really and truly to bring back that employment base that we had. And we have started this during the pandemic, and we've looked at a lot of areas within our industry as well as outside of the industry. So we are, things that we are looking at is in diversifying. Before we were strictly looking at the airline catering, but now we have expanded that to go into things like schools, businesses, business parks, hospitals, because we do mass catering, and we are very good at mass catering. And those are areas we think that we will be able to assist governments and and joining within the governments and the private sector to try to get into those areas. Security is an area that is very, very close to us in the airline industry, and some of our businesses already offer security services. So it is an area that we are looking at we can probably expand as well to improve and increase our footprint in that area. One of the areas that, and I think this will go well with what Keith is speaking about, that we are looking at, and we've actually started in one of our locations already, is looking at frozen foods in our supermarkets and various outlets throughout the Caribbean and Latin America. As most of you would know, most of these products right now are imported from the US. And we have the capacity within the Caribbean, not only within ourselves, but within other businesses, that this is a niche market that we can get into and therefore stop a lot of these imports. There's a double effect to that, which would only be more positive for the Caribbean region. One, it will create further employment, and it also will reduce our import bill, thus safeguarding a lot of the necessary foreign exchange that we so treasure. And this is something that we are looking at to go into in a big way. And this is really going to help us to be able to bring our business back to some sort of normalcy. We are actually not expecting that we're going to see the levels that we were having in 2019 until 2023, 24. And to speak about what Keith is talking about, how are we going to be able to impact our local suppliers? And this is something that our company has been pushing a lot. Wherever we operate, we try to encourage our local farmers. And what has been encouraging through this whole pandemic is that we've seen most of the countries within the Caribbean, and the same thing is happening in Latin America, but they have a very good, strong agricultural base already, is that a lot more people are now realizing the importance of agriculture. I'm sure throughout the Caribbean, we've seen that agriculture probably represents about 2 to 3% of the GDP. We really now see a lot of governments looking to try and get this number into double figures. And we certainly will have to play our part. We have been encouraging the farmers over the years, but once they have a product, we will certainly support them. But one of the things, Keith, we need to work towards, and I'm sure that we can get together on this, is consistency of product. It is an area that we do have problems with, because when we look at, let's say, how our airline industry operates, and this will go into the industrial catering that we intend to expand in, we want to be able to offer our customers, if we have a business in Antigua, and when you go to Barbados, you're going to get the same product, same quality, same standard. And this is something that has plagued us and plagued our farmers over the years in trying to produce a consistent product. And this is something we have to work towards. And as you mentioned before, how are we going to be able to get the products that are supplied throughout the different regions? You mentioned quite a few, and they're all very, very good products. The problem is, by the time it gets to another market, the prices almost doubled because of the transportation issues that we have. And this is something that I would like to think that through this whole pandemic, that we really need to sit as a group of entrepreneurs, business people, government leaders, to see how we can best have this situation of the travel within the region, not only travel for air travel for passengers, but cargo travel, to make it more economical and viable for businesses such as ours and yours, Keith, and the whole agro industry to survive. And once another pandemic come along our way, we will not be severely impacted. Our aim in closing for our industry or our company, right now we are operating at about 70% airline related business to 30% other. We're trying to reverse that so that when and if another pandemic does come around, the impact upon our company would not be as severe, because we would already diversified significantly to have that now 30% probably airline related business and 70% other business. So with those words, I would like to thank you for the opportunity. And if there are any questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pedro. I see there's some questions on the chat, but I would suggest that we are more than 15 minutes, almost more than 15 minutes behind schedule. What I suggest is that we return to the questions and answers in the session that Ina will moderate. So just to thank both Keith and Pedro for their presentations. It's clear that Keith has identified a number of suggestions as to how we could strengthen the linkages between the agri-food and the tourism sectors. Pedro has highlighted the impact on the company that he works with, but also highlighted the fact that suppliers who depend on them for business would also have been impacted. And one of the things that we need to address is how do we, through public policy, through other programs, safeguard the livelihoods of those who are, have been significantly affected. And this is something that we need to return to. But let me take you back to Ina in the interest of time so we can move to the third panel. Ina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you, panelists. Thank you, Keith and Mr. Corbin, for excellent, excellent presentations. Our third panel focuses on public sector. We've heard about promotion of gastronomy, production integration, market intelligence, transportation, value addition for frozen foods, intra-regional trading, policy for tourism to utilize at least 40% of locally produced food, and so on. And this panel looks at policy. We have two of the region's leading ministers, one for tourism, one for agriculture. I'll introduce both and then ask them to give their presentations. Our first speaker is Minister Edmund Bartlett, Minister of Tourism in Jamaica, who has led and is leading several innovative and successful initiatives to link agriculture with tourism, as well as to link tourism with manufacturing, and who will share with us some key perspectives for accelerating recovery. Our second speaker is Minister Indar Ware from here in Barbados, and the response of the agricultural sector to COVID-19 in Barbados has been led by Minister Ware, who has been able to achieve some 16% increase in local food production since the beginning of the pandemic. As Minister of Agriculture and Food Security, he is focusing on bringing about revolutionary changes to agriculture. So without any further ado, I'll ask Minister Bartlett to share his presentation, and then immediately following, Minister Ware will give his presentation. Please go ahead, gentlemen.
Good morning. I assure you, I'm not Minister Bartlett. Unfortunately, he was unable to participate this morning, and I will be standing in his stead. I'm Taisha Turner. Thank you, Ina. The previous panelists have set the tone and outlined the context, I believe, quite well as it relates to the global and regional scenario, the impact of the pandemic, and overall prospects for recovery. Now, this leaves me the focused privilege of sharing the perspective through the lens of the Jamaican government and people with critical messages for recovery. Tourism, as well as agricultural development, food security and nutrition are of utmost importance to the Jamaican government and people. The contribution of both agriculture and tourism to gross domestic product, GDP, is a significant marker of the priority placed on these sectors. Agriculture's contribution to our GDP stands at 7%, with almost 20% of the population employed in this sector, whereas tourism contributes 9.5%, with over 350,000 direct, indirect, and induced jobs. Our targeted policies on sustainable tourism and agricultural development, as espoused in the National Development Plan Vision 2030, highlight the clear path and commitment taken for effective, innovative, and resilient approaches to sustainable development. And the first critical message: it is important that we remain grounded in our long-term policies that have proven effective, even as we confront the unprecedented and dynamic challenges posed by COVID-19. The mandate rests on us all to adjust appropriately to the seasons, swaying like the resilient bamboo. One such long-term policy has been the recognition of the deep-rooted linkages that exist between tourism and other productive sectors of the economy. To this end, the Tourism Linkages Network, established in 2013, positions the tourism sector to increase its consumption of goods and services that can be competitively sourced in Jamaica. Since then, the Linkages Network has expanded its impact and focus on experiential tourism by driving the passion points of our visitors, specifically through 5 networks: gastronomy, health and wellness, sports and entertainment, shopping, and knowledge. For our discussion today, I will focus on the gastronomy network and the underlying linkages between agriculture and gastronomy tourism. Tourism as a people-centered activity relies on culture, including cuisine and gastronomy, to connect with and enhance the experience of tourists. The authenticity flavoring Jamaica's traditional cuisine, a major part of our tourism offering, is the Jamaican farm-to-table or farm-to-fork story that can often accompany our meals. The Agri-Linkages Exchange Project, ALEX, which began 3 years ago, seeks to deepen the linkage between the agriculture and tourism sectors through an internet and telemarketing platform and commodities exchange. The project is funded by the Tourism Enhancement Fund and supported by the Rural Agriculture Development Authority, RADA, the latter under the purview of the Agriculture Ministry. Our second critical message for recovery: we have long known that siloed approaches only serve to stymie development, and so beyond the interministerial collaboration, we're happy to have the buy-in from farmers and hotels, the immediate beneficiaries of this project. Hoteliers are encouraged to source previously non-traditional items like specific herbs, fruits, and exotic culinary ingredients, while farmers have benefited from support to negotiating delivery contracts, accessing loans for expansion, and increasing market capacities. In light of the fallout in the tourism sector from COVID-19, with lower than projected arrivals and restrictions on operations for restaurants and eateries, farmers have found themselves in the short term with surpluses. Our next critical message: COVID has shown us that we have to adapt nimbly. One such adjustment for Alex was expanding to non-traditional stakeholders beyond hotels, such as agri-processors, traders, supermarkets, and other retailers, to market excess produce. Now, between January and August of this year, Alex marketed produce valued at over 61 million Jamaican dollars. However, we must be mindful that a surplus in the short term could transform quickly into food supply shortages as farmers grapple with losing crops, profits, and investments for replanting. The pandemic has highlighted the need to act quickly in the short term with a keen eye on the medium and long term for sustainable and responsible growth. Madam Moderator, as a small island developing state and a net food importing developing country, Jamaica faces severe challenges to produce sufficient quantities of food to support the growing demands of its population, as do other countries in the Caribbean. The region's high food import bill stands at over $5 billion. In response, our heads of state and government at the 31st CARICOM Intersessional Meeting of Heads held in February of this year committed to reducing the regional food import bill by 25% over the next 5 years. The work of the Caribbean Agricultural Research and Development Institute, CARDI, will also be instrumental to this process as they seek to craft a comprehensive plan to strengthen regional agri-food chains in the wake of COVID-19. The responses and plans will undoubtedly require careful consideration of the persistent challenges faced by many of us in the Caribbean, including increased frequency and intensity of extreme weather events, limited availability and use of appropriate technology, and high cost of capital that continue to impact agricultural development, food security, and nutrition. These factors are compounded by the concentration of agriculture in rural areas and as the main source of income for persons living in these areas. In the case of Jamaica, almost 46% of the population reside in rural areas. For this reason, we welcome this year's theme for the commemoration of World Tourism Day, Tourism and Rural Development, as both agriculture and tourism can serve as catalysts for sustainable rural development when we include citizens in the productive process, as well as ensure that they reap the benefits from the overall development in and around their communities. In closing, Madam Moderator, we have to mention innovation and resilience as drivers for successful recovery and beyond, particularly through the effective application of modern technologies. The Alex project has an app that has proven to be useful. However, beyond mobile applications, farmers should be encouraged to employ other innovative methods such as hydroponics, vertical farming, and container systems to address some of the challenges such as limited arable land, drought, and other extreme weather conditions. The time for data-driven action is now more than ever. The use of ICT-enabled data collection and analytical tools such as weather analytics and crop demand studies support decisions on which crops to be grown, when to plant, and other agricultural practices. I remind of my earlier points for recovery. Remain committed to effective long-term plans for sustainable development while being adaptable, maintain and expand on traditional partnerships, empower and include rural communities in the decision-making and productive processes, as well as ensure their participation in the benefits. It is a time now to delve into the opportunities presented by COVID-19 to innovate and transform our communities and economies to withstand better the disruptive threats to sustainable development that will come. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Taisha, and for such sound recommendations, which have encompassed quite a lot of what has been discussed so far. I now invite Minister Indar Ware, Minister of Agriculture and Food Security of Barbados, to give his presentation. You may go ahead, Minister.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Harvey. Very good morning to everyone. Good morning to those on the panel. I want to start by first underscoring the importance of agriculture, not only to Barbados, but to the entire region, if we were to respond successfully to what has basically shown us that we as a region must now stand together if we are going to respond successfully to incidences that confront us that we have no control over. And COVID is about the best example. Barbados relies heavily on tourism for foreign exchange earnings. And I can tell you that our accommodation sector was badly impacted. Our tourism sector, food service sector, accounts for approximately 17% of economic activity and 13% of total employment. It is worthy of note that around 62% of employment in the accommodation and food services industry comprise females. The entire value chain, the entire tourism value chain has been impacted negatively. And so therefore it resulted in job losses, loss of income, risk of businesses closing, and of course, the tourism sector being our main economic and tourism foreign currency earnings driver has been impacted negatively. A CARICOM survey also showed that more people, especially those who are in the lower income groups, are now eating less, and in some cases are going all day without any source of food. If you may move to the next slide. The Barbados government and the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security has responded to the issue of food security since 2018. And we started the Farmers Empowerment and Enfranchisement Drive program, hence the acronym FEED, to do a number of things in terms of deliverables in agriculture. One is to encourage more persons entering agriculture so that we can secure our food and nutrition security. And at the same time, provide an opportunity for younger people and more females to get involved in agriculture. As a matter of fact, this program is supposed over a 3 years period to give us an additional 2,000 farmers between the ages of 18 and 45 using various technologies available in agriculture, freight farming, greenhouse farming, apiculture, aquaponics, a whole suite of different approaches to agriculture that has taken over the 21st century landscape. We have estimated that we would make 1,267 acres of land available to farmers on a special or preferred lease arrangement. And we've started training, and we have already trained a cohort of just about 120 persons who have all been given inputs and support to get started. And now we have another 200 who are currently training, and they too will also be given support and inputs to get started. It is significant to note that through the Barbados Agriculture Development and Marketing Corporation, we have asked that they take 40% of all supplies post-harvest, and that they would take the responsibility to get into agro-processing so that we can then move to the next level where we can, first of all, tap into the diaspora, but at the same time, look to how we can export and market. Next slide. Barbados's food and nutrition security is dependent largely on how we treat to the agricultural sector. The targets for the production of 1,507 acres of short to medium term crops annually was done basically to make sure that we can increase production, knowing that we were going into COVID. We added an additional 536.3 acres of land. And I must say to you that we did surpass that target, hence the reason why we had a 16% growth during the measuring period compared to last year. Barbados's crop production has been increasing, and we have had significant increases in non-sugar agriculture production. An emergency food security fund was established and capitalized through the Agricultural Development Fund, and is being administered through the BADMC, which is really the anchor for non-sugar agriculture in Barbados. Next slide. To note, there are some key initiatives post-COVID that we looked at. We're working in collaboration with IICA and the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. will be seeking funding for a proposal targeting one, the development of a national policy strategy and action plan for agritourism. And this is work that has already started and will be ongoing. And we are transitioning our sugar industry to a value chain industry that would take us from the production of sugar, molasses for our rum industry, and then to renewable energy. In this transitioning, we are also going to establish a museum, which is a sugar museum that would tell the history of sugar, tell the history of Barbados rum, and give us an additional attraction for tourism when tourism rebounds. We're also looking at a full value chain with the black belly sheep. We're projecting to increase our black belly sheep heads to approximately 1 million. And we're also going to take the full value chain from that, where we can then look and develop in manufacturing in terms of various types of leather craft production through the use of the black belly sheep hides. I've mentioned earlier apiculture, and what we're going to do is make sure that we empower those young people who are involved in beekeeping to be able then to give us another shot at manufacturing in terms of doing flavored honeys and other byproducts. The Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security is already working with a task force to make sure that these initiatives are carried out, properly planned, and that the sourcing of inputs and support are properly managed. We are looking at how we can manage our soils, because in Barbados, given the fact that much talk has taken place, but a lot of work has not been done in terms of soil management. We are now investing heavily in equipment so that we can go back to soil management, do proper soil testing, breaking what is called hard panning soils, and giving the farmers an opportunity to be able to increase production through proper soil management. We're also going to be looking at our agricultural health and food control systems, which basically gives us a chance then to make Barbados more competitive in terms of how we export plants, animals, and other products of livestock farming, including our fishing industry. The government has committed to contracting persons for 12 months to facilitate the enhancement of our food security through the engagement of persons to work in agricultural stations. And we have now started an urban project, which would come off at an area close to the capital of Barbados in Leers. And this project is designed primarily to give persons in rural Barbados an opportunity to also participate through a private-public partnership. And we will be establishing water reservoirs there at Leers so that we can have consistent supply of water. Bearing in mind, of course, that the region is impacted heavily by bad drought conditions that are fairly prolonged these days. And so Barbados is taking steps to make sure that we now get into water harvesting in critical agricultural areas so that we can have consistency in supply of water to our farmers. And the establishment of a cooperative investment fund will be used to assist farmers so that they can also have access to finance. Young people will be encouraged to participate. And of course, in order for us to develop urban farming, we're then looking at how we can also get into more freight farming, where our young farmers, those who are interested in technology-driven agriculture, will be able to access these freight farms on a lease-to-own basis. So basically, they don't have any upfront costs. The government would provide the freight farms, and then they would start then a program where they would then use a lease arrangement post-harvest to start then paying back for the freight farms. Next slide. Next slide. The government of Barbados has done quite a bit in terms of getting people involved in agriculture. And our focus mainly is on young farmers, but equally getting more female farmers involved. The slide is not moving. Can we go to the next slide, please? Mrs. Harvey, are you hearing me?
I'm hearing you. The slides are being managed from Andorra in Spain, actually. Maybe you can just give your final remarks, Minister, and then.
Okay.
Yes.
So overall, I would say that we are trending in the right direction in terms of responsiveness. But equally, this is going to be a severe challenge because the region is now going to have to adjust to the way we do things. And like many of the other speakers prior to me would have said, we now have to look at the way we trade. And it is pointless to ask farmers to get involved in agriculture when they don't have, first of all, secure markets. And secondly, when the region is going to compete against itself negatively. I'm firmly of the view that we should look at strengths within the region so that if, let's say, for example, we have a strong poultry industry, then the region should come together and determine how we will continue to keep that going by working with each other. And then if another part of the region, let's say, for example, is strong with coffee, like Jamaica, for example, then we can work together to see how we can keep that going. And that is the way we would increase competitiveness certainly a new conversation must take place in terms of international trade. And that is a conversation that I'm anxious to participate in at Coated, because I recognize that this region will only go so far unless we are prepared now to challenge the status quo. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Ware, and thank you, Taisha, on behalf of Minister Bartlett. A number of the questions that have come up in the Q&A and in the chat relate to value chains, relate to the level of technology in the agricultural production systems in the region. And I think some of them have been answered by what both ministers have shared with us. I think we might have time for one question. Tiana, let me know. I'll take a question from Ainsworth Riley. And community-based tourism was mentioned by Neil Walters of CTO. And the question is, community transmission is one of the major concerns with COVID-19. If the community tourism market segment is open, what would be some of the mitigation measures needed to reduce risk of transmission? I'll ask CTO to make a comment, and if any of the other panelists would like to make a comment, I'll invite them also. Neil?
Thank you, Ina. I'll start off by saying, and Frank mentioned it in his presentation, when the sector was reopened, we did a significant amount of training in some what we saw as critical areas for persons working in this new normal. And one of the areas was in terms of sites and attractions, and the other area was food and beverage. And I chose those two areas specifically because I believe the protocols and the guidelines used in those two areas would actually cover a large majority of the issues that may arise in community-based tourism. Community-based tourism tends to be sites and attractions type of activities related to heritage culture, and also you usually might have some kind of food component, the number of fish fries and so on, small indigenous restaurants around the Caribbean. What has been done is a way to ensure that people working in those types of businesses are aware of the fact that in COVID, having an open air setting is actually beneficial rather than a closed setting. And the fact that there are protocols related to the spacing of guests and visitors, frequent washing of hands, and so on. So there has been a significant amount of work done. I think the list, if I started on a list now, we would probably end after 12. So there's a significant amount of information out there already for persons who will be who are into those areas. The information is being updated as we go along, because as you appreciate, the COVID-19 situation is dynamic, and we're learning every day of new ways to mitigate the risk in terms of dealing with others with COVID in the COVID-19 scenario. So, I mean, I mentioned a couple, but as I said, it's a long list, and it's a comprehensive set of guidelines and checklists that entities interested in that type of area will be able to access. And that is on our website, the information that I gave earlier, and they can use that information to ensure they're compliant with world standards, which those standards, guidelines, and checklists follow.
Thank you very much, Neil. Another question is, what can we do to encourage hotels and restaurants to use more local foods? Frank, I'm going to put you on spot.
Well, I think we've got to let them, continue to let them know that a lot of what that's all about is consumer demand as well. More and more travelers are looking for that, and as they start looking at it from that point of view, that helps. And we provided that kind of data. But the other thing is, there's a couple of things. It's important to be able to make the connect as easy and seamless as possible between the buyer and the supplier. So having systems in place like we've seen developed in places like St. Lucia that I helped to develop in the Bahamas years ago, which unfortunately aren't still in place, but and what we heard from Jamaica earlier, I mean, we're basically making it as easy as possible. It could even be something as easy as a WhatsApp kind of list of suppliers and buyers and what's available, when it's available, how can you get it? I mean, the purchasing decisions have to be made several weeks in advance typically. So there has to be an understanding of what's available, when it's available, how do I get it, and what's the quality of it as well, the consistency and quality. So the more we can provide that kind of information, I think the more we build the consumption of local inputs. The other thing is like we do with our Taste of the Caribbean series, which we took online, by the way, with some interesting things earlier this summer. Where we're basically showing how menus can be adjusted, what are the types of products, how can you capitalize on local products and incorporate them into the menu offerings, and even in the education and training types of sessions for visitors as well, who are intrigued by 99 ways to make conch, or whatever. Well, 99 ways to eat conch, I think is so there's more that can be done in that regard. We're seeing it. We facilitate some of that at CHTA, and we want to do more of that.
Let me put a plug here for what we've been doing with respect to the chefs. And I know that CHTA, in addition to its Taste of the Caribbean, has been doing quite a lot for training of chefs. IICA, together with the CHTA and the CTA, and the CTO recently launched a Caribbean Chefs Alliance. And we hope to professionalize chefs through this alliance, have networks with local chapters, have young persons become certified with the various global chefs associations, and to be champions and advocates for our local cuisine. So things are happening with our chefs, and we have lots of chefs, hundreds of chefs working in the cruises, working in our diaspora, working in our hotels, who are promoting Caribbean, who are committed to really notching up our cuisine and presenting our local foods. And so I think they play an important part.
Absolutely, and having the support of some of the wholesalers that were on today as well, talking about what they do, having their support locally as well as for our regional training and promotion efforts, I think really helps us to be more effective in what we need to do to make that stronger connect.
Thanks, Frank. We have another question. What can we do in the short term to connect Latin America and the Caribbean for bolstering regional food supplies without having to rely on or transit through the USA? We have Panama. I don't know who might want to answer there. I know that from the Caribbean Private Sector Group, we're looking at innovative ways for using the Central American routing systems for more South-South cooperation, and in terms of technology, for using blockchain technology so that we integrate all of the data for production integration, market intelligence, and so on, so that our supply system becomes more globally competitive. I don't know if anybody else would like to add anything.
If I can just add to that, although
yes,
it's not
please. Yes, please,
my area, but certainly we know because of our operations in South America, we do know that South America is an area that is rich in a lot of agricultural products in particular. And one of the things I think we probably need to look at within the Caribbean is where can we develop a transshipment hub within the Caribbean that we can have that direct link between South America and the Caribbean, as opposed to, you mentioned Panama, but that is just replacing the US with Panama. We need to really get the route coming directly from South America to the Caribbean. And I think this is something that our tourism officials and governments, and certainly with the private sector assistance, should be able to try to create these direct links between South America and the Caribbean. We just do not have enough at this point in time.
And I think with agencies like IICA being a hemispheric organization and having a presence in all of the member states in the Americas, in South America, in the Andean region, in the Southern Cone, and so, we can certainly begin to talk to see how we can stimulate our private and public sector partners to have this integration in transportation and trade.
Okay.
Another comment here, building business models based on value chain integration and SME inclusion, diversification, logistics, quality standards, and regional integration are the takeaway of some of these excellent presentations, and I want to agree with that. We have, let me go into the Q&A and take another comment. In an effort to build the resilience and competitiveness required in the agri-food sector, there needs to be research and innovation. How do we achieve this? Let me ask one of my ministers, maybe Minister Ware or Taisha, to talk about research and innovation a bit.
Thanks, Mrs. Harvey. You may note that I mentioned the BADMC, Barbados Agriculture Development and Marketing Corporation. And I recognize that through the BADMC that we have great potential in terms of how we can do research and development. Now, there are several things that we do and we do well, but we keep them just at the primary level. We haven't gone beyond thinking how, through research and development, we can create other value chain products. We have, for example, in Barbados, the Home Agriculture Station as a good example, where plants will, over time, have severe plant diseases for various reasons. The Home Agriculture Station is currently involved in research and development to see how we can build out tissue culture, for example, to give us clean planting material in crops like sweet potatoes and yams, and you know the diseases that are impacting them currently, cassava, etc. Now, if we are able to, first of all, mitigate challenges with diseases through research and development in terms of tissue culture as one example. And then if we can look at how we can reduce the use of pesticides, for example, by getting back to using a more robust approach to what we did very well in the past. But of course, we will need to do the necessary research because the world is not the same anymore. And you don't want to be involved in importing pest diseases or pests that will impact your agriculture negatively. But we certainly have to look at how we can use predators now. And that would take some research in terms of how we can build that out. And then plants overall. The plant pathology unit within the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security is going to have its work cut out because we're no longer living in silos, and we're going to have to be ahead of the curve in terms of how we then treat to the whole issue of plant diseases, how they are manifesting, where they will come from, how we can mitigate them. There's a fair amount of work that needs to be done in terms of research and development, even for the medicinal cannabis industry, which is the industry that has taken off within the region, an industry that has taken off globally. But in terms of cultivars and the best CBDs and THCs, it's going to take a tremendous amount of work to shape and develop the cultivars that would give us the best returns on investment.
Thank you, Minister.
Ina, if I could just add
Yes, Keith, please.
Something to that. We need to take note. If you look at the countries that have made it, the developed countries, those that have emerged like South Korea and Singapore, the percentage of the budget spent on research and development is 100 times higher than what we here in the Caribbean do. So it's a matter of a centralized policy at the highest level to allocate more to research and development that incorporates and support the universities more in this area, because we have a lot of raw material here which could emerge as very valuable to us. But the central government structure needs to allocate more to research and development. Immediately, research does not necessarily return a profit. So a private farmer cannot necessarily borrow money from the bank to do research, which may be a dead end. I think the governments need to accept a greater responsibility in this area so that we can move forward faster.
Absolutely agree. Excellent point. And on that note, we are near the end of our time, and I want to invite our UNWTO and IICA representatives to help us close the meeting. Note that we will be sharing the recording of this webinar We can continue to chat and exchange on the social media channels on this very important topic. And for my own part, let me thank our esteemed panelists for taking the time to join us today. We look forward to seeing all of you again for another IICA UNWTO event. So I now invite Alejandro and Lloyd to give some closing remarks on behalf of both hosts of this webinar. Alejandro?
Thank you, Ina. Thank you very much. I think this is it was a very good beginning. I think this is, it was a good experience and an excellent idea to provide to our countries in the Caribbean this kind of things and this kind of ideas and views. And I also wanted to include the mention of our our experience in gastronomy, and we wanted to highlight that we have a special section based on gastronomy, and we are also dealing with that in the next months. Also, you have to remember that this year is the year of tourism and rural development. And we also support all these initiatives that are related to rural communities, because they hold onto their community the unique cultural heritage. We support conservation progress, including the lost traditions and the flavors. We understand that the crisis that we are facing has shown us the importance of making decisions at the right time. But in the spirit of solidarity that defines tourism, I think it is essential to share our expertise and abilities with others to learn and apply this in our countries. We need more health and sanitary protocols, certification, and labels, which are crucial steps to restore trust and confidence in the sector. So our sector has proven its ability to bounce back and help societies recover. Let's do it again, Ina. Let's do it again in the next time. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Alejandro. And Lloyd, for your closing remarks.
Thank you, Ina, and thanks to all the participants. I thought the presentations were excellent. Taisha and Minister Weir started talking about food, and I think they got me hungry. They may have gotten all of you hungry. I think the notion of trying to promote Caribbean cuisine within the tourism sector in the Caribbean is very important. I live here in a hotel condominium complex in Costa Rica, and the hotel is the main business, and it's about a 90-room place, and it's gone from half capacity to essentially zero capacity. And I've seen for 7 months the owners try to maintain staff working at 15 to 20% maximum, rotating jobs from security to gardening to the opening the restaurant when it's open, and then buying supplies for a big Father's Day lunch, and all of a sudden the government has to close it because of the increase in the pandemic. It's been a devastating time for tourism, but it's been a devastating time for agriculture too, that had was selling into this market, and then it fell away and they had to adapt and find other ways. I think we in agriculture need to find ways to make the agriculture production for local consumption in the Caribbean more resilient, because it's very dependent on imports. But I think working with the tourism sector in the Caribbean, we also hope to see a commitment of that sector promote the local development of agriculture and local foods in the tourism sector. But on our part, it's clear, Ina and Greg, that we have to make sure that, and Minister Weir, we have to make sure that the food, as I think Pedro mentioned, needs to be of a consistent quality and safe and able to go into the market like any other business. And so that's the role that we have to do. And as I think Keith said, we need to take this downtime to work on that and to make ourselves better and stronger. And that's going to require investment. That's going to require partnerships and collaboration, like with the UNWTO and the tourism sector in the Caribbean, and the tourism businesses that operate in the Caribbean to help support this region that they all love dearly and vacation to on a multi-million person basis every year. How do we get that basis of support for the Caribbean to support their cuisine and also to support the economic development of the islands and countries in this region. And that, I think, is very important. So I think this was a very good first step. We appreciate the relationship with the UNWTO and all the organizations that participated in this, and we thank you very much. I think there's a lot of food for thought on how we can continue this partnership and help promote the economic development of both agriculture and tourism in the region. So I wish you all a very good Friday and a good weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, Lloyd. And with those words, I say thanks to everyone who has joined, and have a good Friday, and take care and stay safe. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you.
Bye.